Warzoners, and welcome to the Warzone Chronicles. This is Alfie. So in this video, we have a very special guest. Same way that, we had Alex Kanous from Resnova in the last video. Click on the description and all that. In this video, we got in touch with Bryan C.P. Steele, developer of the rules of the new Warzone. Our idea was, for you guys to get to know the mind behind the new Warzone, a little bit better. Okay, who he is, what his experience is, and what he could tell us from the new Warzone. All right. So without further ado, I'll leave you with the video. Hello, Warzoners! Welcome to the Warzone Chronicles. This is Alfie as usual, and today we also have three very special guests on the channel. First of all, we have from the Spanish community, as in the last episode. Click in the description for the video. We have Andrés Toribio, organizer of the last three editions of Warzone Resurrection tournaments in Spain. Hello, Andrés.
Hello. I'm happy to stay here again, and it's this very special day and very special interview. So here we are. I'm waiting for make the first questions.
Likewise. And also we have Álvaro Lareo from Silver Skull Painting Studio in the Basque Country, organizer of the Basque tournaments for Warzone Resurrection. Hello, Álvaro.
Hello there. How you doing, guys?
Not so bad. And the star of the show of today's episode, Bryan C.P. Steele, the man behind the new edition of Warzone himself, and many other previous experiences within the gaming world. We were just discussing the arcades and other projects. Hello, Bryan. An absolute pleasure to have you, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
This is my pleasure. I love what we're doing, and I've never met a microphone I didn't love, so we're good.
Cool stuff. So yeah, today we're going to be asking Bryan some interviews for those of you who haven't had the chance to get to know a little bit of Bryan's work and about the current project. So we'll start with a little scenario for you, Bryan. So imagine you're in an elevator. Someone walks in, huge Warzone fan, and you have 30 seconds, as long as the elevator takes you to your destination, to say who Bryan C.P. Steele is and, the man behind Warzone, so in a nutshell, who you are and what you do.
My intro would be easy. I am really just a gamer and a professional nerd. I get paid to do all of the nerdy things that people hopefully enjoy. I'm a writer and a game designer, and over the course of 20 years, I've managed to get involved in marketing and voiceovers and commercials and videos and painting and sculpting. And I at this point, there's not really a facet in the industry that I haven't at least tried. I think I'm better at certain things than I am others, but I've got my fingers in just about every pie that I can. And honestly, I kind of live and breathe games. That's it's my life.
Like you guys.
Stuff. Okay, sold. He's sold. He's in on it. All right, Andrés, you have a question for him?
So, what made you to want to be a game designer? What made you?
Honestly, it's kind of a funny story. I never really wanted to be a game designer. I started out. I went to college for English education. I wanted to be I wanted to be an English teacher because my view was I've always wanted to write. I've always written short stories and magazine articles and things like that. And I was like, oh, being a teacher, I can take my summers off, and that's when I'll write all of my blockbuster novels and screenplays, and that's when I'll make all my real money is during the summer. And I got as far as actually student teaching a couple of classes, and then I realized that was not for me. I love children. I love teenagers just when I can put them away to someone else. Like, I love my kids. Other people's kids I can't handle. So it's just, I knew it really didn't,. It didn't gel with me. So I kind of floundered for a bit, and 2 years ago I decided to worked dead end job to dead end job, and eventually, my wife at the time, she worked with me to hopefully buy into a local comic book store. Basically, like, we were going to go halvesies and buy half of my of the local comic book shop. And during that process, the guy who currently owned the shop said, "Hey, why don't you come with me to one of these trade shows that like only retailers get to be at?" It's not. I had been to Gen Con a million times. I had been to so I had done the gamer stuff before, but I had never done the back end thing. And so we went to it's called the Alliance Trade Expo, and it's all just retailers and shop owners and game makers. And I kept going back to this one booth where they had these cool little steampunk suits and little guys, and they had this really neat game, and they had some D&D stuff attached to it too. But I was really focused on this game, and it was not only just a fun game, and it was a neat the imagery behind it, but they actually had a really good set of mechanics, and I was like, this is going to be something awesome. And so I offered to them if there was anything I could do to help peddle their game, demo in the stores or whatever, let me know. Basically, I was looking for free stuff. At that point in my life, I was just like, hey, give me free models, and that would be awesome. And we ended up drinking a bunch of beers and playing their game most of that night, just over and over and over again, the same 7 or 8 models, and it just really found the complexity of this seemingly simple game. And then at the end of the night, I gave my business card, which was effectively like a perforated piece of paper at that point, and it attached to my MySpace account. So this was a while ago, and I gave it to them, and so I was like, if there's anything I can do, let me know. And a couple of weeks later, they got in touch with me. It was Matt Wilson and Brian Snowdy from Privateer Press. They got in touch with me, and they said, hey, it says here that you've done some writing, which I had done some fanzine work, fictional reality for Mark Thierer. I had done a bunch of articles for him, but nothing really paid. It was all just like, hey, put my name on a page someplace. And they said, hey, can you do a test piece? It says you've done some writing, and we'd like to give you a chance to do something with it. And so I wrote him a test piece, and Matt really liked it and said, can you do, as luck would have it, our primary author left the company unexpectedly. Can you do 70,000 words before August? And at that point, I didn't even know what that looked like. So I was like, sure, yeah, absolutely. 100%. I can do as many words as you need because it's a paying gig. And that ended up being the original Warmachine Prime. That ended up being Warmachine Prime. We won 3 Origins Awards for it the following year. And I knew that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I want to do game fiction. I want to create characters. I remember going into my first game store and hearing somebody talking about characters that I made, like in the background, and I got goosebumps. It's like, oh my god, they're talking about my stuff. That's crazy, And that's exactly, the whole design element didn't come until later. But it was, I want to be in the game industry field. I want to be a creative. And I never looked back. That was 2002. I quit my last bad part-time job in 2004, and I've been full-time game industry ever since. Sometimes to my wife's chagrin, because the money's not fabulous all the time. But I obviously know what I want to do, and I attribute to becoming a designer as basically, I was in the right place at the right time, and then hopefully it's been skill since then. I got into the right car at the right time, but then hopefully from here on out, people actually like what I've been doing. But that's it. I fell into it, and I couldn't be happier.
That's okay. Thank you.
Sorry, it's a long-winded answer.
What are the highlights of your career?
I gotta say, Warmachine was a big one.
Warmachine as well. So yeah, you're.
Warmachine. One of the biggest things, like I said, it was the first book that I ever autographed. I had someone actually walk up to me for the very first time. I was at a game store, and like the game store owner was a friend of mine, and they're playing Warmachine in the back, and because I'm one of those people, they were mispronouncing something that I created, and so I don't, and so it's like it's Asphyxious, and they're like, oh, okay, and so they moved on, and the game store owner was like, well, he made that guy, and they brought me their books and asked me to sign them, and that's one of those just moments where initially it's a joke, like, okay, I'm gonna get my autograph pen, but the first time that I had people at like a convention bring me things, and they're like, your games and your writing have really done a lot for our group or anything like that. That's Warmachine did a lot of that. It was a really the early years of Warmachine, it was like a family. As it grew, I know that it became more corporate because it had to, just because as things get larger and have more moving parts, you can't treat it like an old family business. But a lot of those guys from those first couple of years, I still hang out with. That I can still consider some of my best friends in the industry, despite having not worked with them in over a decade. That was great. A couple other things. I worked for Mongoose Publishing for about 6 years. It was almost all role. Mongoose Publishing did a lot of IP stuff. They did Starship Troopers, Conan, Babylon 5. They did a lot of IP like source books. And so, although the work was really hard at Mongoose, the deadlines were rough there. That was easily the hardest time. And of course, people who work like industry jobs and like they go to a factory and stuff, please do not make fun of me. I understand your jobs are super hard. What I mean is respectively so. It was the hardest amount of just word output that I had to do every month, but it got me. I would say most of the people that I know in the industry, and I got to meet people at Warner Brothers. I worked for a Conan video game because of Mongoose. There's a lot of things because of all of those little licenses that I got, had my fingers in. It was because of Mongoose and the way that they did their games that I got to touch those things, and I'm extremely thankful and grateful for the ability to leave my fingerprints on whatever IPs that I can. And some of those are pretty big licenses for me to look back on and go, I was in the room with 3 of the people that own the Heinlein estate. It's a pretty big deal for me in that instance. And one of the highlights of my entire career was while I was at Mongoose. We were at one of the conventions, selling our ware as you do. Here, buy my stuff. And Dave Arneson, one of the fathers of D&D, basically one of Gary Gygax's partners in crime, wheeled up in his wheelchair with his handler and bought a bunch of our Conan stuff. And before he left the booth, he was like, Brian, and I because obviously I'm wearing a name tag, so it's not like he recognized my face by any stretch of the imagination. But he was like, you've done some stuff in the Conan, right? And I was like, yeah, I've written some of that. And he goes, keep up the good work. I almost cried, like in the booth right there. Like I waited until he wheeled away. I almost started like just weeping happily in the booth because one of the creators of D&D gave me effectively a pat on the back and told me to keep going. And that's, D&D is what got me started when I was 7 years old into this. I followed them for it was one of my unexpected idols, basically saying, hey, good job, keep doing what you're doing. And I'll remember that moment until my brain stops working, which hopefully will be much further down the road. But yeah, and then I think the most recent thing from in my career that jumped out and really kind of left a mark with me was my time at Dark Age. Dark Age was an unexpected. I knew I was going to be doing some writing for it, but I had no idea that I was eventually going to be in charge of it. And when David Doust, one of the owners and creators of Dark Age initially, when David Doust handed me the reins and was like, and I remember asking him and be like, so how much control do I have? What do I do? You know, like, what do you want me to do? And he was like, no, you let me know what we're going to make. And at that moment, I was just over the moon. Suddenly I had this existing, living, breathing game in my hands, and was, from here on out, it was going to be my story to tell. It was going to be, I was going to design what models we were going to come out. Are we going to go bigger? Are we going to go smaller? Like that. And that was such an unbelievable experience for those couple of years while I was in charge of Dark Age. I wouldn't trade that, all of the stress and sleepless nights, I wouldn't trade it for the world. That was a great, great time. And I will always miss being, no matter what else I do, I will always miss the Dark Age development meetings and, getting the freelancers together and letting them know, okay, hey, this is the next big thing, and hearing people in the meeting room being like, oh, like I'm unveiling the next chapter of a book that they didn't know about, and that was easily the height of for a designer or a developer to have that level of impact on a license that I already enjoyed. I was already a player. I already enjoyed the situation, and then I was like, all right, hey, now go ahead and run with it. That was awesome.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Great.
All right. And next question. Could you tell us a funny anecdote that happened to you while designing a game?
I will. Oh my God. It's No, it's a good one. I'm gonna go all the way back to the Warmachine era. So one of the leads at Warmachine is Jason Souls. Jason Souls, he's an amazing guy. He's a great artist. He's a sculptor and a physical artist. Like, he makes like sculptures, like brass, like it's not like sculptures. It's, he's a completely different animal. But I remember getting my first, the first rundown of, okay, here are the 8 characters that you need to create stories for, and this guy might need a name. This guy, like, some of the edit marks were down to red line, bald guy with axe. That was literally, or it was angry bald guy with an axe. That was what I was told. The butcher.
Yeah, we sure.
That was all I was told about him. Basically, my initial edit remarks were those 5 words. And I remember getting a hold of Jason and be like, so what else with this guy? And like, why is he the butcher? And he was like, I don't know, figure it out. So it was one of those things where it's like, I'm writing these stories. I got, Haley, from the Signar girl. I got her name. She is Captain Victorian Hale. We knew who she was, but they were like, she has a spear and she has to have some kind of wind power. That's what I was told. And then I remember going to Matt Wilson and going, all right, so I've created this evil girl. Can I make them sisters? Is it cool? Can I make them sisters? And he was like, yeah, that's fine. I was like, can I make them twins? And he's like, I don't know, was that too cliche? And I remember Jason basically being like, no, twins are fine. The models kind of look alike. It was just he's like, yeah, it'll be fine. One's wearing a mask. It was so, for being the actual core elements of their game and their story, the most important characters to these nations, the requests of what they were was, Scar was a pirate chick with goat horns. I mean, like, it was just so laid back. And then the difference was like Stryker had like a full paragraph of, he has to have this, he has to have this, he has to have red hair, he has to, it was really in depth on a couple of them. But some of the ones that later on have become like, fan favorites were absolutely just half of a shorthand scrawl from Jason, because they knew what the model or what the art looked like. And that was the extent of it. So yeah, that's probably my funniest story from from a design standpoint of just basically being handed what I thought was going to be, you know, all right, I've got all these rules and regulations that I've got to follow because this is their world, and I'm picking up from something. Because at that point, I was picking up from where their last writer left off when he left the company. So I'm expecting, oh, there's going to be all of these, you know, things that I've got to marry together and all that stuff. Not even close. Yeah, it was a fun experience, and like I said, I will always miss the original original Warmachine days. Those were a lot of fun.
Cool stuff. Well, thank you very much, Brian. We have concluded the first section of the interview, which is, you know, about you, your career, you know, a little bit of your experience. So now let's go with Mutant Chronicles.
All right, I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure your fans are like, all right, get going. God, just quit talking about yourself. Let's talk about little guys.
Let's talk about that. All right, Andres. So, what's your question?
So, what do you like best about Mutant Chronicles, just in the terms of loot?
So I got into the Mutant Chronicles originally through Target Games' Warzone. I didn't even know that the Mutant Chronicles were a thing, like as far as like the novels and the role-playing games and things like that. I didn't know that was a deal. I got into the game because of the miniatures. I remember seeing Izogul for the first time, and I was like, oh, I love that, and I'm sold. Izogul, Biogiants, big giant scary things. I was a Dark Legion player for a very long time, and it wasn't until later that I realized that there was a larger universe, that it wasn't just a game, that there was other stuff to kind of consume about, you know, the seals of mankind and things like that. I was like, that's pretty cool. I didn't even know that this was a thing. But I have always, I think that the most attractive part of the Mutant Chronicles to me collectively is that it takes a very similar, like I'm very big into Shadowrun, like the mega corporations taking over, you know, countries kind of taking a back foot to who's making the money. So that, like, the idea of these corporate nations at this point, and corporate planets later on, that's always been a kind of an attractive nature to me. That, you know, a company gets so powerful that they eventually just kind of looks at their local government and says, you can come play at our tea table. It's cool. You know, you now work for us. You know, when that happens, and you know, you look at things like, you know, not to get all, you know, socio-political, but you look at things like Amazon and Google, where you know, Jeff Bezos makes more money breathing than an entire nation in South America makes all year long on its trades. It's insane. But you can kind of see where, you know, barring the whole, you know, corporate wars and people whipping out guns and things, barring that, you can see where some of this stuff could take place. Where you could have corporations that are as large as continents step up and just go, you know, government is silly, we've got a CEO. And that's like, you know, not to besmirch my current political state here in the States, but I kind of wouldn't mind a CEO right now. I'd be okay with some corporate upshift instead of what we have going on currently. And then there's the whole. So I remember the first time reading about the Dark Legion. You know, I've played 40K since the 80s, and so I'm used to Chaos Gods. I'm used to demons from another dimension. You know, that sort of thing. But what got me was the description of the symmetry.
Yeah.
That it's not magic. It's not sorcery. It's just math that you don't understand. It's very Cthulhu nature. It's very Lovecraftian in how it's perceived. And then on top of that, there is a series of books by an author named Brian Lumley called the Necroscope series. It's about really weird vampires, not safe for children. It is not a young adult book. But there's a guy. They do a lot of psychic powers and stuff in this book, and one of the ways that they explained it is that this guy with one of his psychic powers, he can basically alter reality by changing how math works in his head. He like does an equation in his head, and things happen. And seeing that in print, and then seeing and reading about the dark symmetry, and knowing how Lovecraftian, kind of old world thought goes, all of these things kind of mash together to make the symmetry in my brain, and I love it. I love the idea of, it's not sorcery, it's not blood magic, they're rewriting the way that reality works on the fly, and I dig it. That's always been why the Dark Legion was so attractive to me, is not because of monsters, although painting monsters is super fun.
Yeah,
I was doing that a little bit this morning. My fingers are blue. But it was the concept that they're not just these demons from another dimension that want to take over. They actually have personalities and thoughts, and this is a new area for them to conquer, but not in the old Chaos God sort of way.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, in demonstrations, as you mentioned, when I'm explaining the fluff and stuff like that, to people who are interested in the game, I always say, well, look at the current, climate. Imagine that you have your Apple, your Disney becoming a nation, and that's what happened. So,
yeah.
I just see an army of Apple. I'm really keen to see an army designed by Apple. Really, really, really.
I would be more keen on
Cybertronic's not far.
That could be
Disney army.
A house and Cybertronic, something like that. I'd love to see that.
All right, Álvaro.
I think you already answered the question, but spill the beans. What's your favorite faction unit in Mutant Chronicles? And please don't say Mishima.
Hands down, the thing that I probably like the most, more of all things, is the Biogiant. I love, but it needs a new model.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it needs a new model for multiple reasons. But the my faction wise, probably Mawawahe. Because I've always, again, it goes back to that Lovecraftian, make them go crazy, make them go mad, serve me through your brains just kind of snapping like twigs. So I've always loved Mawawahe. But actual, like, what individual model probably leaps out, I really loved the second round of Mortificators. They were really slick looking.
It was great. Yeah.
But Valpurgius is probably one of the best. He's got even the old, the first model of him. He had very good, like, I'm standing there, I'm pointing with my two fingers, which anyone who knows anything, if you point at something with two fingers, you obviously mean it 10 times more than with one. So the fact that his model was doing this, it's like, no. But yeah, he had a really good face. I love the idea of a bad guy who's even kind of against his other bad guys. He has his own stuff going on. So, like, storyline wise, I dug what he would. I kind of wanted to see where some of the authors at the time, like Matt Forbeck and those guys, where they would have taken Valpurgius's. Would he ever have bucked against the main Algaroth guy, which I'm drawing a blank.
Alakai.
Okay.
Thank you. Would he ever have tried to usurp his role? Try to take over. I wanted to see where that was going, because I don't know, evil Pope, and that's kind of worked up.
Yeah.
He's the evil Pope.
You got a little bit. Yeah, it's new bit.
All right. So, as a Doom Trooper player myself, I have to ask you: have you played Doom Trooper, or I think you already answered. The RPG, or Seeds of the Citadel, any other products from
Modiphius or anything like that. I have the role playing game. I have not played it. I've read through it several times. We just never had a chance to play it. The Siege of the Citadel I've never played. it has never crossed my desk. I've never been in a position to play it. Doom Trooper, I had many cards. That was a the art is what sold me on that card on the card game.
Definitely.
So yeah, I would say maybe 15 years ago. God, maybe 20. Ugh, I'm old. I was big into. I played a lot of Magic. I played a lot of Jihad: The Eternal Struggle. Card games. I played a ton of. We would do all night card game sessions at my friend's house. And Doom Trooper was in that cycle. So we played a lot of Doom Trooper too.
Cool.
So about the game, about the Warzone, the old editions. Out of the previous editions, remember most fondly, and we one with the most gamer passion.
Well, I never played Revolution or Resurrection. Sorry. In fact,
Well,
I didn't.
First, second, or Ultimate Edition.
Target to the second edition of Target games is probably the one that I played the most of. We played a lot of the first edition, but as soon as second edition popped up, and that I remember that big box that had all the plastic hussars. We probably between the 5 or 6 of people in now my playtest group, my gaming group, we probably bought 5 or 6 of that box, just because of just the sheer amount of models that you got out of that. And one of my close friends is a big Bauhaus player, so hussars. But so I would say the one that got the most play from us is definitely the second edition. We played a lot of the first edition, but the second edition, when there was not a transition. Like we didn't wait. It wasn't a, hey, you want to play some of the old and like kind of work our way into the new. It was like, no, this one's out. The old one is dead to us. Now let's play this new set of this, what we've got in front of us. And we played that all the way up until Target went away. And then Excelsior, I believe, is who picked it up next.
Yeah.
We played a little bit of the Ultimate Warzone, because Ultimate really wasn't different, honestly, other than a couple of things here and there, than the second edition Target game. It was just a compilation of a lot of things with some tweaks here and there. So it felt like an extension of Second Ed. And then I don't even remember what happened that we stopped playing. Something, there was like a shift in the game. There was a shift in the gaming equilibrium. Something came out and it just stole all of our attention away for several years. And then at that point, I didn't even realize that Warzone was gone. Or later on, I didn't realize that it had gotten picked back up. I had been so busy with other things that I remember going to a convention. I was at a Gen Con, and one of my buddies, one of my guys who used to play Warzone with me, came up and brought me the new Nephrite of Algoroth from Protoss. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. I was like, that's a really cool model. And I was like, man, I didn't realize Warzone was still a thing, except it was late enough that apparently he bought it not from Protoss, he bought it from one of the resale shops who had bought it for pennies on the dollar, because the license was already going away. So I didn't hear about Warzone Resurrection until after it was done. Which was why when Alex got in touch with me, when Alex reached out and was like, hey, we want you to headline this new version of Warzone, I kind of had to do it. I mean, obviously I dove in with both feet. I was like, hell yeah, I want to be part of Warzone. But I did have to let him know. I was like, how much of the last edition are you gonna, is this a continuation of what's already been there? Are we doing our own thing? What are we doing? Because if it's a continuation of what's been before, I'm going to need some research material, because I've never played it. I'd never seen it played. Like, it was, the Resurrection was completely a blank slate to me. Luckily, Alex already had kind of a outline of what he wanted in the new of what Resnova wanted for the new Warzone, and then basically he handed that over to me and said, "All right, make it go. You know, you're in charge of this now." And I remember we had a couple of phone meetings early on where I didn't know how much of his guidelines I could change. How much of this can I tweak to make it work, or am I really, or like, these are the pillars that are holding up the game, and I can't, I got to keep all this. And he was like, as long as you explain what you're doing, he's like, as long as you explain why you're changing stuff and you're not just gutting a section for no reason, we'll work it through. And honestly, a lot of what he already made was pretty solid. He had the guidelines that I had to follow were already pretty. I had good bones to work with, is really what it came down to. I'm sorry, I totally tangented on that from that story, but yes, the one I played the most was Target 2.
Okay, next question. I honestly, I don't know who wrote the next question, but it is a funny one. So consider a hot dog eating competition. Who do you think would win in a Mutant Chronicles universe? An undead legendary, a house resort, or a Bolt Vein Commando?
What was the third one?
Bolt Vein Commando.
Is it like an actual like speed hot dogging contest? Like they're all lined up and they're just eating as many as they can, or is it just eat until you're stuffed?
I haven't made the question, so I don't know. Let's say the good one.
I did.
So it's just eat. How many they can put down?
Yeah.
Undead
No speed required, because obviously the undead legionnaires would be at a major disadvantage there.
Well, but I think that they're at a major advantage if there's no time limit, because they can eat until they pop and just keep eating.
Yeah.
It's like, there's an organ cavity. They don't even have a stomach. Otherwise, I'd probably give it to the Hussar. That's probably part of their staple, part of their rations. It's on their, like, one of the many pouches on their belt is got like some sausage for the road. That's a good question. Now I'm gonna have to think about it. Although I guarantee when we get our undead legionnaires, I'm going to sculpt sausages on one of them. And you can quote me. I will have sausages. It'll be my guy will have sausages. A little bandolier of sausages. I'm like, this is Alfie. This is Alfie, my undead legionnaire who won the sausage eating contest.
And took some home. All right. Next question. What I think it's practically answered already, but what do you think makes Mutant Chronicles special as a universe?
Honestly, I think what makes it stand out is that it's a lot. I mean, it is. You can look at it and go, oh, there's a lot of things. Like 40K is very similar. There are a lot of shades to it, but more than anything, it is a straight up story about good versus evil. There's different shades. There's definitely different shades of good. And even there's kind of different shades of evil when you get into some of the personalities of the different Nephirites and things. But overall, I would say that it comes down to that kind of space opera feel of light versus dark. And not to hint at anything that happens in the new version of the Warzone game. The new Warzone is very light versus dark. In fact, when you play the game, you basically choose one side or the other. Mm-hmm. Whether it's two corporate entities fighting, there is a light side being played and there is a dark side being played, and that's actually what changes some of the scenarios, some of your victory objectives and things. And the reason, the explanation for someone might be like, I don't want to play for the bad guys. You might not. Part of the effects of the dark symmetry is you may not know that you are. Mm-hmm. It might just be Bauhaus versus Imperial. The Imperials obviously every day would chop into an Algaroth force like nobody's business. But today they've been puppeteered and orchestrated to be at this right place, right time, that, should you win at what you're going to do, Algaroth laughs at you. You might not know it, but you are doing, the Dark Apostles' work, or the Dark Apostles' work. And that's kind of where the part of when you're setting up a game. Hopefully, Alex. Again, all of these things may change. Alex said that before too. But currently, when you go to set up your game, basically you have to roll to find out which side you're on, depending on which faction you are. Obviously, a Brotherhood force, unless they are fighting another Brotherhood force, is automatically the light side. They just, one of those. It's you're not going to see very many Brotherhood folks fighting on the wrong side of things unless they've really been kind of puppeteered, and that's why Brotherhood versus Brotherhood, someone has really made some kind of mistake there. And obviously in a tournament setup, that's going to be more like tongue-in-cheek. This is more for narrative play than anything else. It's honestly, it's a way for, one of the things that I have always stood behind, and this has always bothered me in 40K. It's bothered me. Hell, let's try that again. It bothered me in Dark Age until I changed it. That when you're playing a mindless faction of just destroying monsters, Tyranids, Brood, whatever, that you get a primary objective of save the guy or protect the innocent orphan. That just doesn't make any sense. And so one of the things I wanted to make sure that the new Warzone had is a little bit more of a narrative turn when it comes to what you're doing on the field. So instead of, if you're playing a game that's got a hostage, running around, if you're on the light side, you're gonna be protecting the hostage. You're trying to get him away, whatever. If you're on the Servants of Darkness side, you're there to murder the guy, and make sure that he dies in a particularly gruesome way, And then it's up to us that we want to make sure that game is balanced, because it's very easy, especially hostage scenarios tend to always lean towards the kill side of things, especially in a game with ranged combat. So in the current version of that scenario, the Agents of Light have to try and keep him safe until X game turn. The Servants of Darkness have to try and kill him, but they have to try and kill him with close combat. So you can try and maneuver your guys around to kind of pen him in, and then bring in that charger to deal the final blow, because otherwise it'd be just too easy to be like, all right, well, I grab my sniper dude and just pop him. He's done. All right, yay. The idea being that the dark side, the Dark Apostles, they need this guy to really be dead. Not just a flesh wound, not just, he's being whisked away wounded. They need to make sure that he is guts on the ground dead. And that's the whole close combat. So I think I answered the question, or I totally circumvented it with my own stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, you did. Really did dig that. Thank you for for that little snippet. Actually, I really like that.
Well, let's go to talk a few deeper in the new edition of Warzone. So, other than the first edition, what, if any, was have you taken inspiration for the new design of the rules?
The biggest thing I think that we take away, that people will see right away, is we've gone back to the skirmish style initially, where it is a low model count. Each individual model, I mean, you could field lots of little guys if you really kind of wanted to, but even then, lots is still going to be drastically fewer than some of the other versions of the game have made. But the feel we wanted is this team of 5, 6, 7 models or whatever that you've got going in are kind of the elite side of things, which is why initially we're not really messing with Hussars, we're not really messing with Trenchers or Regulars. Those cats are going to come later when we expand the game into a more, just where you start seeing more of a of a battle feel rather than a mission feel. And that's kind of what the very beginning of Target games, that like when that first thing is, all right, I have a squad of blood berets, and this is what I've brought. And in this instance, hopefully you're going to see a couple of blood berets, a couple of golden lions, maybe a wolfsbane or two. Kind of a little bit more mix and match. Even though I was not a fan of the movie that came out, it has its problems. I like the feel of that group. Not the Bauhaus guy and the Cardinal guy, and that, like, not from different factions, but I liked the feel of each person kind of represented a different kind of tactic or a different sort of mentality on the battlefield. And I think that is something that can translate well to the new Warzone. Is you could have a guy who's your close combat specialist, you can have your demo guy, you can have a heavy weapon guy, a sneaky fella, and then maybe one or two grunts to take up the slack when you get your mission parameters, and your mission says one of your dudes has to run across the get into the other guy's end zone, so to speak. You might not want to do that with your heavy weapon. He's probably going to be in the back laying down fire. Maybe these slightly more expendable grunts, they'll make the end run while everybody else is kind of doing their thing. And so I think, although the movie was less than expected, that feel of a special weapons team or a special forces team is kind of what we want for that, especially for the initial launch. We want each model to feel like they're not just cannon fodder, that they are a reason for being on the field. So, and part of that is because your basic blood beret should be pretty badass. I mean, like they shouldn't just be one hit wonder. I get shot and then I'm down. They should be able to take a little bit of a beating, and keep pushing forward. And we have a new damage system, I would say. The way that it works currently in the game is it is possible for a model to just get offed depending on what you're hit by, but for the most part, if you're well armored and you're getting hit with small arms fire, it might take a couple of rounds to have you actually removed as a casualty. Hopefully giving an opportunity if someone decided to spend the points and bring a medic, because that has always been in 40K, medics just give you a special, you get an extra save. In Dark Age, medics had a bubble of your guys don't die, and that's also kind of it feels funny just having my guy within 30 feet, I don't die. That seems odd. So the way that the damage system will work in this one is, if you're not made a casualty, if you're not just out, hopefully your medic can come over and pull some of these damage-based counters off of you, bring you back up to speed, and then move on with the game. So that way, if you've decided to spend the points and have a medic as part of your special forces team, they actually are doing something. They're not just a guy with a bag that deals out the occasional wound. If that, again, I tangent quite a bit, so my mind goes a million miles a minute. If I lose track of what you're saying, just be like, raise a hand and be like, Brian, you've lost me.
Not at all.
So far, what has been the most satisfying or gratifying part of writing the rules and the most challenging
for the new game?
Yeah.
Honestly, getting to dive into the flavor of the different corporations and try and make them different from one another. Because we're trying not to make drastic changes from one human to the next. As if you're a human soldier who's trained really well and just you've been through your basic training, you've been through your special forces training, generally speaking, you're going to be roughly the same as the next human soldier down the line. What's going to be different is any particular training you've taken and your equipment that you're carrying. And so what it comes down to is trying to make those tiny little adjustments here and there, so that So the corporate forces don't feel drastically different from each other, but they feel different enough that a Mishima player can go, okay, I see what I'm supposed to be doing with these particular forces versus the guy who's playing Bauhaus and goes, oh, okay, that's what these guys are supposed to do. But their stat lines are generally pretty similar, aside from like equipment and, like if someone's a trained, the trained close combat guys are going to have better close combat stats, and they might be a little faster if they're wearing lighter armor. You're not going to have someone who's wearing a giant combat suit that is just as fast as the as the guy who's wearing basically a leotard, unless that combat suit is specifically built to make them run faster. So that's I think the most rewarding thing is basically getting to look at a corporation, look at these first couple units that we're making, because that's the other thing is that, well, Alex, I would love to just dive in and go crazy and be like, all right, let's make everything. Alex has told me to pump the brakes. Let's make a couple of units per faction first. Let's ease our way into this, because if obviously we don't want to do the negative thing that a lot of companies have done, where we tell you, hey, here's 40 units that are amazing, but you got to wait 8 years for any models for them. We would rather have it be slow, a nice gradual. My ideal thing will be, I hope that we'll be able to have 5 or 6 different units by the game's launch. Basically, not like necessarily immediately for purchase, but at least for people to proxy, to use some of their old Protoss models or anything like that to stand in to play the game, until we get a chance to make our own models. So that's my personal goal. Whether or not Alex lets me go crazy and design all that stuff, and whether or not my time permitting, I've got other projects that I've got to work on that I can't necessarily give all of my life over to Warzone, because I have a house to keep. I have to be able to pay the bills. But that's probably the my favorite thing of the new Warzone process anyway, is trying to make the different humans feel similar but distinctly within their own corporation. Cybertronic obviously being the most fun, because you get to kind of go a little crazy with them, because they've got all those various bits and bobs that aren't meat.
And the most challenging part of it?
The most challenging part, not being biased towards things that I want to be super cool. And that's honestly just a design thing that's game designer wide. Because there are things that I'll see and go, man, I want everybody and their brother to field these guys because they're so awesome. The model is going to be great. They're going to be fantastic. I want to see these guys everywhere. And then I got to remember, it's like, oh, hey, but I also want people not to yell at me that, the Attila 3, Cuirassier is not, hey, nobody fields 6 of these guys for a reason. Quit it. I want to be able to make it so every single model we put out is worth fielding. Part of my design mantra is I absolutely hate, more than anything, when I talk to somebody about a game or their army or whatever, and someone uses the term, well, this is a must take, or you got to have one of these, or well, I would never field these. Those two things I despise. I don't want someone to have to feel that they must take a model because they'll lose without it. And I don't ever want to feel somebody look at a model and go, that's terrible, I'll never bring it. I want them to be backed off a little bit and have everything have a reason to be cool. For whether it's a scenario thing or whether it's this particular faction, it's nice to have big monsters, but maybe not all the time. Like that sort of thing. Because I would honestly would love to see Dark Legion players field a bunch of just like a horde of undead legionnaires and mutants sometimes. Just not necessarily always have the Razide or the Praetorian Stalkers or something in the background. Just really go with that kind of grunt on grunt feel, except we outnumber you because our guys are made of reanimated meat. Right. So that's probably the big thing, is it not not making something too cool because I love it.
Absolutely agree with you, Vip.
Yeah.
Right, so the last question before we get into the spoilery part of, I mean, spoilery questions about the new Warzone, and needless to say, as much as you can answer, okay, that's not a problem.
Well, and in all honesty, anything that I say that Alex doesn't like, he'll probably make me change. So.
Okay, no problem.
He'll make me a liar. He'll be like, haha.
I gotcha.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, Brian, how many liters of coffee have been required to accomplish this rule set?
I go through one French press a day. Every day. Well, I don't sleep like normal people do. I generally stay up till about 1 or 2 in the morning playing video games and whatever to try and calm my nerves and relax. I sleep for 4 or 5 hours, and then the animals get me up. I nap a lot in the afternoon, sometimes on purpose. One of my favorites is my wife. She came into the door one day and she goes, "Hey." I'm like, "Yes." I completely fell asleep in the chair, had no idea for how long, but I had my elbow on the space bar. And I had something in the neighborhood of 750 pages of spaces. It's just which of course it's easy to just basically go back to where it was and delete everything else. But it was just one of those funny moments where I was like, if you could time it, if you could figure out how long it takes for a space to go, be like, that's how long you were asleep. But yeah, no, I go through quite a bit of coffee because I have a very hard time. Yeah, it's gonna get personal in here. Part of the reason why I became a writer is because my imagination doesn't ever stop. Sometimes to my detriment. I have a condition, thankfully non-medicatable. If that makes any sense. I'm not on any drugs for it. But if sometimes when somebody will give me a piece of information, I will grab it, and it's called apocalyptic thinking. I will spin with it and go to the most ridiculous end result, but it will ruin everything along the way. Like basically, I'll go to call my ex-wife, and just basically like call to see what time I'm picking the boy up tomorrow or whatever, and she doesn't answer. Okay. 10 minutes later, I try and call again. She doesn't answer. So I go to call her boyfriend. He doesn't answer. And at some point, something will trigger in my brain. The imagination will kick over and go, oh, well, that's because they obviously left to go to the grocery store and got in a car accident, and they can't answer their phone because they're in a ditch somewhere. Oh, and your son was in the car too. And it'll everything kind of collapses. And it literally takes someone to normally kind of go, hey, Brian, they're fine. They just didn't answer their phones.
Yeah.
Like you kind of a reality reminder.
Like you iterate a lot yourself.
And so it is especially powerful while I'm asleep. So my dreams are either some of the coolest, most best, most amazing. Like I wake up and I'm like, I got to write that down right now. Or some of my nightmares are the kind of things that I wake up at like 2 or 3 in the morning and go, I'm done sleeping. I'm gonna go paint. Like, I don't want to go back to bed. I'm done. And it's always been that way ever since I was a little kid. And so one of the things that has always helped me to get through these kind of weird imagination waves is writing. Is basically writing it down or getting my brain on a completely different wavelength. Like, I could have a horrible, nightmare about cars, we'll say, and then I'll sit down and be like, all right, I'm gonna make like 5 monsters for D&D, and then by the end of like my 3rd monster, I've completely forgotten what's going on, and then we're good. I can move forward, and so it's always been kind of an escape from my own brain. But part of that is the drawback is that I don't sleep very much. I do a lot of early morning game design, and sometimes it doesn't work out. I designed a card game at 4 in the morning after waking up after a nightmare one day, and it worked okay, and it ended up being a huge waste of my time. But it was just that's the kind of where my brain how my brain goes. So to answer your question again, yes, I drink a lot of coffee. I drink a lot of coffee, and because of my dear friend Terry up in Canada, I drink coffee with maple syrup in it. No cream, no sugar, no nothing else. You just put, and it can't be pancake syrup. It can't be like the weird factory stuff, because that stuff just kind of gels and is gross. It has to be real maple syrup. You put like 2 or 3 tablespoons at the bottom of your coffee, and it's amazing. And a Canadian showed me that, and I laughed at her when she said, "No, give it a try." I was like, "Oh, okay." And now I can't not do it. I'll go to restaurants and actually ask them if they've got real maple syrup or if they got pancake syrup, and they're like, "Oh, I think it's just pancake syrup." I'm like, "All right, never mind, no coffee. I'll take I'll take a lemonade. I'm good." So yeah. I know that was supposed to be a funny question. We got all deep and weird, but that's what you get when you get Brian. You get deep and weird.
Not at all. Right. So yeah, now the spoiler questions. Again, feel free to answer. So Andres.
So now it's time to talk a few about rules. I don't know if you can't say everything, but it's okay. So will there be moral test or opinion test, or maybe some miniatures can run away from the battlefields or something like that?
So initially, there is the morale system. It's not like a fleeing panic sort of thing, unless something causes you to do so. Unless there's some kind of dark symmetry thing that's like, hey, run. Because initially the troops that were releasing, they're all special forces. These guys are supposed to be, they've seen it. They know that mutants crawl up out of the gutter and occasionally you got to put a bullet in their head. They shouldn't run just from a firefight. It should be something above and beyond that makes them go, all right, time. We need to be out of here. So something truly terrifying. So rather than a morale system that's based off of every model, it'll be more along the lines of certain models will have the ability to break your will and make you flee. And that will be built into that model's special rules rather than the game system itself. Later on, I expect, I've got plans for when things like the normal guys, like the Hussars and the Trenchers, when you've got some of the basic grunts who are a little less trained, who might run and falter, that you might end up seeing a more of a morale, maybe almost like a negative rule placed onto that group, rather than a blanket rule. Now, that being said, there is rules for basically taking penalties for being pinned down by fire. You can be suppressed. So there are rules for having the ability to want to live over standing out in the middle of the middle of the field, but not so much actual like morale and fear and terror, unless something is going to legitimately cause it. I can guarantee when Wawahe, when that force pack becomes a reality, he's going to have quite a bit of stuff that says, get away, go this way, get off the objective. Because I don't know, Wawahe in my head sounds like some kind of Muppet. He's crazy and basically manipulates you via all of your scary nightmares.
Right. There will be templates. I mean, lately in the well, at least in the latest game designs that I tried, there's like a new way of avoiding templates for the games. So in Warzone Resolution, there I think there always has been some sort of templates for flamers or shotguns or something like that.
There have always been templates up until I don't know the Resurrection.
The resources. Yep.
Okay. I like templates. Alex likes templates, but rules design, generally speaking, does not, because it is very hard to mathematically calculate when it comes down to balancing something. It's hard to calculate to bring into human error factor.
Yeah.
Is the when they place that flamer template, am I looking at it at the right angle? Am I looking at it straight down? It is easy. It's honestly the reason why a lot of games have moved away from templates is because it is easier to use a mathematic.
Yeah. So
if you hit this area, it is 3 inches from that spot. Grab your tape measure. It's honestly the same reason why most war games have moved away from guessing ranges, where it's measure any time, that sort of thing, because it eliminates that fudginess, especially as games get more competitive. You need to be able to get rid of the argument factor. And templates, sadly, create a lot of argument factor. I wish they didn't. There was a part of me, because Alex, his initial rule set was he was all set for templates, and that was one of the things that I ended up changing is I took templates out because there's just enough wiggle room that not to mention it. You get that secondary problem of now it's on you. Do you cut up your book? Do you do we do a PDF and hope that your printer is the same as the next guy's printer? Did it print the exact same parameter? Or as a company, do we put out a secondary product that now you have to buy that is the template set to make sure that everybody gets it? It costs us to make it. It costs you to buy it. That's the only templates just cause just enough issue for a small game that I thought it'd be easier to get to remove them and have everything be mathematics. There is a part of me that will always will miss like the Screaming Legionnaire, the Laughing Flamer. I can't remember what it's called. It was the one that when that book came out, the template was all swirly colored, and there's a part of me that will always.
I saw it in the second edition, but I don't remember the name of the flamer as well.
Yeah, it's one of the Screaming Legionnaires. It was one of their special weapons, and it basically was a flamethrower that made you go insane. And the template for it was all swirly colored and like it was trippy mess, and I'll miss things like that, but from a design standpoint, it is simply easier for us to say a flamethrower does this, and it hits from the sides of my base. Like if here's my base, we're gonna borrow this Aether Elemental. If it hits here and it goes out to 12 inches, that's the spot. There's no wiggle room. There's no this is how far it goes. And when it comes to like blasts and things, again, you pick a central point, you put a marker down, you put a die or whatever, and then it's just X number of inches from that spot. Easy peasy. What I don't like, and this is actually something, I'm a big 40K player. I don't like blasts being random hits on a single squad or something, because that doesn't make any sense. Luckily the new version of 40K has fixed that. Not that I'm like pitching their game right now, but they've mitigated if you hit a particularly large enough group, the dice are maximized, that sort of thing. But I've never been a big fan of, if I'm shooting this giant cannon, like the Unholy Cannonade from Dark Legion, and it hits one guy, it's artillery, it should be making a big mess. And so that's it. Also, I when it comes to that kind of random hits, it also means you can't scatter, and that's always been a big thing for me. Is part of the reason there's a cliche for it. Close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. So if you're throwing a hand grenade, if you're not quite on target, you should still possibly be able to hit somebody. So I wanted to make sure that there was the ability to possibly scatter, move that explosion around a little bit.
Yeah, grenades in that age were fun.
You love the mall
it
dynamic.
needs to be able to move around. So, but yeah, so no, in the current version of the rules, unless Alex decides to go back and say yes, we definitely want templates, which would be an easy change. The current version of the rules, no templates, but there's still a lot of areas of effect and stuff.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay. Right, I think that's all the questions we have for you today, Brian. Thank you very, very much for answering. And again, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. It's so much fun, chatting to you, in the flesh, I was going to say, but
in the digital,
in the ether, digital ether. And again, thank you so much. And well, we'll definitely be in touch.
I have one question for you guys, because I don't know, since I don't know necessarily. I mean, obviously, Alfie, I know who you are, but I don't know who your names are when it came to that big thread. Where do you guys stand on Tiger Dragons?
Hey, I love them. One of my favorite Mishima units. And I like the armor. Actually, I remember in the video you with Alex. I think you had gripes with the armor.
I
have to agree with you. With the illustration. That illustration of I think it's Tatsumoto. Not the best. The proportions and all that.
It's just very box. It's like a box and a box and a box and a box. I actually really liked the ones that Protos made. The ones that came out later on. I actually did like those. And I mentioned that to Alex. I was like, so when we remake the Tiger Dragons, and he goes, well, we need to stick to the Bonner style. I was like, yeah, but can we lean a little closer to armor that looks like it works? I'd be all right with that. Yeah,
well, I don't think it really depends if the armor itself is powered, or I mean, the Tiger Dragon's supposed to have a lot of armor, like a lot damn amount of armor. So the question for me is it powered? It is an armor who works basically by some sort of engine or anything like that could make any more sense to make it way more bulkier, like the illustration of the old Warzone. But if you're just making a very good armor for a solid guy, we go more for a sort of lean Warzone Resurrection-like style.
Yeah.
It all depends on the context at the end of the day.
I'm just trying to get a hashtag fix Tiger Dragons is really all I want.
Well, they're Mishima. I don't have
Mishima. Yeah.
I have a feeling that you have strong emotions against Mishima.
You can imagine, I'm a Mishima player. I love Mishima. I'm absolutely. So we have a little bit of a
we
come
together.
Gotcha.
I'm an Imperial player, and Alfie is more Mishima-like, and we are all making a little concept.
Fantastic.
Yeah, who would win in a fight? A katana, a broadsword, that kind of thing.
Well,
definitely a katana, but anyway, that's.
Well, then you've got the headhunter axes, and that's a whole other ball of wax is the axes that the headhunters have.
Yeah, headhunters, that's hard to beat. Anyway, Brian, thank you so much for the interview, and all the best with the project. And well, we are right behind you.
Well, we'll keep things updated as much as possible. I know Alex has been really cool about letting me talk about stuff on my channel. So hopefully, when we get a few more things kind of set in stone and cemented in where they're not moving, I'll start being able to talk more about the actual moving parts and stuff in the background. So. That's what I'm hoping.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Bryan C.P. Steele. So that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. It was an absolute blast to chat to Brian. All around nice fella, and whom you should definitely follow on his channel, Tales from a Professional Nerd. I'll write the link in the description as well. All right, so that's the video for today. Thank you very much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing. It's of great help for the channel. And I'll see you in the next video with further developments. Keep warzoning.